Hello, and welcome back to our reading of the Life Divine. So we're several pages into chapter 7 now in book 2, the knowledge and the ignorance. Sri Aurobindo launched the chapter with a cluster of verses taken from the Rig Veda and the Shvetashvatara Upanishad, and took a quick view of the nature of the universe that we inhabit. A world which we know has come from a great mystery, an unnameable, unknowable source. But if anything in our mind can appreciate what that mystery is, we call it positively Sat Chit Ananda. Out of that unknowable, maybe it's Sat, maybe it's Asat. Maybe those words fall away meaning nothing when we approach that. But from that is this truth, this true being, Sat, which stands as the core of all reality. But it is not a blank existence, it is regnant with consciousness. It is Chit. Chit, not absent of power. It is full of power. But its experience of its infinite being, of its infinite consciousness, is infinite delight. So it is Sat Chit Ananda. And that great reality coordinates, cosmicizes itself in a vast consciousness of truth, where the infinite becomes finite, where the formless takes on form, where truth is many-splendored, but not divided. Differentiation exists in this supramental reality, which in Sanskrit we call vijnana, but no division is there. Oneness and diversity are in the supreme harmony. But from that capacity to diversify, as a kind of vicegerent, the mind involves itself from the supermind and stands as its own cognitive power and becomes, in a sense, the first of the descending principles to leave knowledge and plunge into involutionary state after involutionary state. So if in mind we find the first principle of division, in life we find the closeted power of being, and finally in matter we find closeted being itself. And that is the way we can, in a sense, see the world. Sat above is matter here. Consciousness above is the life power here. Vijnana, the supermind above, is mind here. But that Ananda is represented in the soul of the world and in the soul of the individual as it progresses through the experience of self and cosmos in this intertwined mutual process where both the individual and the cosmos grow and expand, expressing that deep truth which is the core of Brahman, always growing, always expanding. Sat Chit Ananda, supermind. Mind, life, and matter are those 7 worlds. All are here. There is no there. All are here. There is no division in being, but our mind sees it. So, we've come to a point where I think we can proceed with our coverage of the chapter. It is true that the first origin of the ignorance is beyond us as mental beings, because our intelligence lives and moves within the ignorance itself and does not reach up to the point or ascend on to the plane where that separation took place, of which the individual mind is the result. But this is true of the first origin and fundamental truth of all things, and on this principle we should have to rest satisfied with the general agnosticism. Man has to work in the ignorance, to learn under its conditions, to know it up to its farthest point, so that he may arrive at its borders where it meets the truth, touch its final lid of luminous obscuration, and develop the faculties which enable him to overstep that powerful but really unsubstantial barrier. And that is an allusion to the golden lid, which we met in the Isha Upanishad, in the 15th verse there. He continues, "We have then to scrutinize more closely than we have yet done the character and operation of this principle or this power of ignorance, and arrive at a clearer conception of its nature and origin. But first, we must fix firmly in our minds what we mean by the word itself, ignorance. The distinction between the knowledge and the ignorance begins with the hymns of the Rig Veda. Here, knowledge appears to signify a consciousness of the truth, the right, satyam, ritam, and of all that is of the order of the truth and right. Ignorance is an unconsciousness, a chitti, of the truth and right, an opposition to its workings, and a creation of false or adverse workings. This takes us back to his first motto at the start of the chapter. Ignorance is the absence of the divine eye of perception, which gives us the sight of the supramental truth. It is the non-perceiving principle in our consciousness, as opposed to the truth-perceiving conscious vision and knowledge. Now this is, again, the Vedic definition of what is ignorance as opposed to knowledge. In its actual operation, this non-perceiving is not an entire inconscience, the inconscient sea from which this world has arisen, apraketam salilam, but either a limited or a false knowledge, a knowledge based on the division of undivided being, founded upon the fragmentary, the little, opposed to the opulent, vast, and luminous completeness of things. This is another Upanishadic allusion. It is a cognition which, by the opportunity of its limitations, is turned into falsehood and supported in that aspect by the sons of darkness and division, the dasyas of the Vedas, enemies of the divine endeavor in man, the assailants, robbers, coverers of his light of knowledge. It was therefore regarded as an undivine Maya, Adevi Maya. I'll reread the sentence. I want to note here that I could not find a reference to Adevi Maya anywhere in the Rig Veda. I did find one to Asarasya Mayaya in the 10th mandala 177.1. Interestingly, to me, it was paired with the image of the bird, the great bird which represents the cosmic soul and the individual soul, playing with the dualities of ignorance. And there the bird is called Patangam. So again, I'll start over with that. It was therefore regarded as an undivine Maya, that which creates false mental forms and appearances, and hence the later significance of this word, which seems to have meant originally a formative power of knowledge, the true magic of the supreme mage, the divine magician, but was also used for the adverse formative power of a lower knowledge, the deceit, illusion, and deluding magic of the Rakshasa. Well, we've had many occasions to talk about Maya, which is, in its strict sense, the finitizing power of the infinite consciousness, that which in the Supreme Intelligence is able to take the vastness of the infinite and to convert it into a limited form. However large the cosmos might be, it is still a limitation of the infinite. So it is that intelligence which can do that trick and therefore be cunning, be magical. The divine Maya, he continues, is the knowledge of the truth of things, its essence, law, operation, which the gods possess and on which they found their own eternal action and creation and their building of their powers in the human being. Devanam adabdha pratani. And again, I could not find that citation. I found something similar. This means really the first laws of working of the gods. So this idea that the divine Maya is an operation of an active truth. It orders things and is constructive both of cosmos and of the powers in our own personal human beings. This idea of the Vedic mystics can, in a more metaphysical thought and language, be translated into the conception that the ignorance is in its origin a dividing mental knowledge which does not grasp the unity, essence, self-law of things in their one origin and in their universality, but works rather upon divided particulars, separate phenomena, partial relations, as if they were the truth we had to seize, or as if they could really be understood at all without going back behind the division to the unity, behind the dispersion to the universality. The knowledge is that which tends towards unification, and attaining to the supramental faculty seizes the oneness, the essence, the self-law of existence, and views and deals with the multiplicity of things out of that light and plenitude in some sort, as does the divine himself from the highest height whence he embraces the world. So again, this is an invitation to the aspiring human soul who climbs beyond that border and can access that knowledge to be like the divine and never losing sight of the essence behind all the diversity and seizing upon those powers in terms of joy and plenitude as an exercise of knowledge. So the knowledge knows and is the harmony of the one expressing the many, of the many finding the essence in each and back in the one. It must be noted, however, that the ignorance in this conception of it is still a kind of knowledge, but because it is limited, it is open at any point to the intrusion of falsehood and error. It turns into a wrong conception of things, which stands in opposition to the true knowledge. So far, he's described in this section what we mean by knowledge and what we mean by ignorance in the Vedic context. The first visioning of seers in India about this great problem of existence. And now we turn from the Veda. In the Vedantic thought of the Upanishad, we find the original Vedic terms replaced by the familiar antinomy of vidya and avidya, knowledge and ignorance. And with the change of terms, there has come a certain development of significance. For since the nature of the knowledge is to find the truth, and the fundamental truth is the one, The Veda speaks repeatedly of it as that truth, tat satyam, and that one, tad ekam. Vidya, knowledge, in its highest spiritual sense, came to mean purely and trenchantly the knowledge of the one. Avidya, ignorance, purely and trenchantly the knowledge of the divided many, divorced, as in our world it is divorced, from the unifying consciousness of the one reality. So a firm gulf, can a gulf be firm? Let's just say a deep gulf between knowledge and ignorance there. The complex associations, the rich contents, the luminous penumbra of varied and corollary ideas and significant figures, which belonged to the conception of the Vedic words, were largely lost in a language more precise and metaphysical, less psychological and flexible. So the Upanishads are clearer in their exposition, but they have lost some of the symbolism, some of the richness of the meaning of the Vedic terms. Still, the later exaggerated idea of absolute separation from the true truth of self and spirit, of an original illusion, of a consciousness that can be equated with dream or with hallucination, did not at first enter into the Vedantic conception of the ignorance. That will occur thousands of years later with Shankara and Gaudapada, etc. If in the Upanishads it is declared that the man who lives and moves within the ignorance wanders about stumbling like a blind man led by the blind and returns ever to the net of death which is spread wide for him, it is also affirmed elsewhere in the Upanishads that he who follows after the knowledge only enters as if into a blinder darkness than he who follows after the ignorance, and that the man who knows Brahman as both the ignorance and the knowledge, as both the one and the many, as both the becoming and the non-becoming, crosses by the ignorance, by the experience of the multiplicity, beyond death, and by the knowledge takes possession of immortality. Well, we've gone trotting through a number of Upanishads here. The idea of the blind man led by the blind, that's the Mundaka Upanishad, 1-8, the Katha Upanishad, 2.5, the Maitri Upanishad, chapter 7, verse 9, and the idea that if you go after the knowledge only, you enter into a blind darkness all by itself. That's the Isha Upanishad, again, verse 9. And then if you can consummate both and bring into yourself the becoming and the non-becoming, the one and the many, the knowledge and the ignorance, that is Isha Upanishad, verse 11. So here we have an early formulation of great Vedantic knowledge as applied to the nature of the universe. None of it canceling out or annihilating the universe, recognizing that it, the universe, is an expression of that. So he goes on, for the self-existent has really become these many existences. The Upanishad can say to the Divine Being in all solemnity and with no thought to mislead, thou art this old man walking with his staff, yonder boy and girl, this blue-winged bird, that red of eye. Shvetashvatara Upanishad 4, 3, and 4. Not thou seemest to be these things to the self-deluding mind of the ignorance. The status of becoming is inferior to the status of being, but still it is the being that becomes all that is in the universe. This is a central point to Sri Aurobindo. Yes, the universe is a limitation of that. In no way could it be the fullest expression. When we speak about it or see it spoken of in the Veda, it's spoken of in fractional terms, only a fragment, only a fingernail, only a quarter of what is there is expressed here. Big as it seems to you, most is unmanifest. And yet, what is manifest here, you should cherish, you should regard with adoration, you should honor, you should work well with it, you should not abuse, deny, or refuse it. But the development of the separative distinction could not stop here. It had to go to its logical extreme. Since the knowledge of the one is knowledge and the knowledge of the many is ignorance, there can be, in a rigidly analytic and dialectical view, nothing but pure opposition between the things denoted by the two terms. There is no essential unity between them, no reconciliation possible. This, of course, is the contradiction of logic. If logic is the judge of reality, then they can never meet. You cannot join the two. They must be irreconcilable opposites. And this, of course, is an argument that gains sway with the increasing, developing dominance of mental reason as it takes over the fields of philosophy, displaces vision with the power of logic. Therefore, vidya alone is knowledge, avidya is pure ignorance. And if pure ignorance takes a positive form, it is because it is not merely a not knowing of truth, but a creation of illusions and delusions, of seemingly real unrealities, of temporarily valid falsehoods. Of course, we've seen these arguments, haven't we? Obviously, then, the object matter of avidya can have no true and abiding existence. The many are an illusion. The world has no real being. Undoubtedly, it has a sort of existence while it lasts, as a dream has, or the long-continued hallucination of a delirious or diminished brain, but no more. The one has not become, and can never become, many. The self has not, and cannot become all these existences. Brahman has not manifested, and cannot manifest a real world in itself. It is only the mind, or some principle of which mind is a result, that thrusts names and forms upon the featureless unity, which is alone real, and, being essentially featureless, cannot manifest real feature and variation. Or else, if it manifests these things, then that is a temporal and temporary reality which vanishes and is convicted of unreality by the illumination of true knowledge. Well, this is a recap of all the illusionistic arguments of Advaita Vedanta that we saw him destroy one after the other, severally, in the last chapter. He states them here again. Our view of the ultimate reality and of the true nature of Maya has compelled us to depart from these later fine excesses of the dialectical intellect and return to the original Vedantic conception, quote, or rather parentheses, of the Upanishads. That's the original Vedantic formulation. While giving every tribute to the magnificent fearlessness of these extreme conclusions, to the uncompromising logical force and acuity of these speculations, inexpugnable so long as the premises are granted, admitting the truth of two of the main contentions, the sole reality of the Brahman, and the fact that our normal conceptions about ourselves and world existence are stamped with ignorance, are imperfect, are misleading, we are obliged to withdraw from the hold so powerfully laid by this conception of Maya on the intelligence. So he's kissing them goodbye. Acuity means sharpness, and inexpugnable, isn't that a wonderful word, means not to be taken by assault, by storm. For if these two are independent, equal, and original powers of the consciousness, then the possibility of a cosmic illusion pursues us. Again, speaking of ignorance and knowledge. Knowledge and ignorance. If ignorance is the very character of cosmic existence, then our experience of the universe, if not the universe itself, becomes illusory. Or, if ignorance is not the very grain of our natural being, but still an original and eternal power of consciousness, then, while there can be a truth of cosmos, it may be impossible for a being in the universe, while he is in it, to know its truth. He can only arrive at real knowledge by passing beyond mind and thought, beyond this world formation, and viewing all things from above in some supracosmic or supercosmic consciousness, like those who have become of one nature with the eternal and dwell in him, unborn in the creation and unafflicted by the cataclysmic destruction of the worlds below them. Well, this is interesting. There are not only modern European philosophies, but there are theistic Vedantic schools which also take this view that you cannot know the nature of the universe so long as you are within it. You cannot access that unknowability. And some of this is also familiar to the Gnostic philosophies. In the Near East, a couple of thousand years ago, the reference to the Gita, by the way, would be, there are a number of verses that you can find in the Gita that speak to that. Chapter 10, verses 3 through 8, again, 10:42. Chapter 12, verse 8. Chapter 13, 17, and I fatigued of counting the others. So, for the dialectical intellect is not a sufficient judge of essential or spiritual truths. Oh, did I finish reading that paragraph? Maybe not. Let me back up. If I'm redundant, forgive me. But the solution of this problem cannot be satisfactorily pursued and reached on the basis of an examination of words and ideas or a dialectical discussion. It must be the result of a total observation and penetration of the relevant facts of consciousness, both those of the surface and those below or above our surface level or behind our frontal surface, and a successful fathoming of their significance. So he suggests rapidly here, in summary fashion, that we are not looking at a flat universe here. It is only our consciousness which can really penetrate it all, but that consciousness is not just those items which present themselves to us on the surface view. There is a consciousness below. Yes, even what we would call the subconscious or the unconscious leading down towards the inconscient is part of the field of consciousness. And consciousness stretches above, endlessly above, into the superconscient and behind in subliminal nature. So he is drawing us to an awareness which would inspire all planes and possibilities of becoming, that would span all that is manifest, all that is made clear to the view of the divine consciousness. So let's go on. For the dialectical intellect is not a sufficient judge of essential or spiritual truths. Moreover, very often by its propensity to deal with words and abstract ideas as if they were binding realities, it wears them as chains and does not look freely beyond them to the essential and total facts of our existence. Intellectual statement is an account to our intelligence and a justification by reasoning of a seeing of things which pre-exists in our turn of mind or temperament, or in some tendency of our nature, and secretly predetermines the very reasoning that claims to lead to it. Now this obviously is familiar to modern psychology, even to all of modern philosophy dating back to Descartes, Locke, Berkeley, Hume, Kant. So our view of things from our mental status is conditioned and biased. Can we really use it as a veridical instrument, an instrument that derives truth from its view? Is it not too partial, too restricted for that? That reasoning itself can be conclusive only if the perception of things on which it rests is both a true and a whole seeing. Here, what we have to see truly and integrally is the nature and validity of our consciousness, the origin and scope of our mentality. But then alone can we know the truth of our being and nature, and of world being and world nature. So, the point of this paragraph so far is that we will not rely upon the logician. We will not let intellectual activity be our leader in this. We have to see. We have to become rishis, to know the truth of our personal nature and the world nature. Not to see with that depth of penetration is to rely on ignorance to deliver knowledge. No. Through our own developing sight, through our own experience, we must penetrate to the very center of things and find there that ever-living essence. Our principle in such an inquiry must be to see and know. The diacritical intellect is to be used only so far as it helps to clarify our arrangement and justify our expression of the vision and the knowledge, but it cannot be allowed to govern our conceptions and exclude truth that does not fall within the rigid frame of its logic. So, logic and philosophy can be useful to us so far as we use it to ground in terms knowable and understandable to the mind what is that greater range of experience and being to which our soul can gain access through a greatening knowledge, through vision, through experience. Illusion, knowledge, and ignorance are terms or results of our consciousness, and it is only by looking deeply into our consciousness that we can discover and determine the character and relations of the knowledge and the ignorance, or of the illusion if it exists, and the reality. Being is no doubt the fundamental object of inquiry, things in themselves and things in their nature. But it is only through consciousness that we can approach being. So it is the power of consciousness, the Shakti in Chit, which can ascertain the knowledge of its own being, Sat. But it is only through consciousness that we can approach being. Or if it be maintained that we can only reach being, enter into the real because it is superconscient through extinction or transcendence of consciousness, or through its self-transcendence and self-transformation, it is still through consciousness that we must arrive at the knowledge of this necessity and the process or power of execution of this extinction or this self-transcendence, this transformation. Then, through consciousness, to know of the superconscient truth becomes the supreme need, and to discover the power and process of consciousness by which it can pass into superconscience, the supreme discovery. So again, we have stepped beyond several of the schools of Advaita Vedanta and realize now that we must access and normalize this superconscience to which he refers. But in ourselves, consciousness seems to be identical with mind. In any case, mind is so dominant a factor of our being that to examine its fundamental movements is the first necessity. In fact, however, mind is not the whole of us. There is also in us a life and a body, a subconscience and an inconscience. There is a spiritual entity whose origin and secret truth, the psyche, carry us into an occult inward consciousness and to superconscience. So he has enlarged the map of consciousness and being in this sentence. If mind were all, or if the nature of the original consciousness in things were of the nature of mind, illusion or ignorance might conceivably be regarded as the source of our natural existence. For limitation of knowledge and obscuration of knowledge by mind nature create error and illusion. Illusions created by mind action are among the first facts of our consciousness. It might therefore be conceivably held that mind is the matrix of an ignorance which makes us create or represent to ourselves a false world, a world that is nothing more than a subjective construction of the consciousness. And here again we're at a point where the argument is akin to the idea of Vedantic subjective illusionism. We're not going there. Or else, mind might be the matrix in which some original illusion or ignorance, Maya or avidya, cast the seed of a false impermanent universe. Mind would still be the mother, a barren mother since the child would be unreal, and Maya or avidya could be looked at as a sort of grandmother of the universe. For mind itself would be a production or reproduction of Maya. But it is difficult to discern the physiognomy of this obscure and enigmatic ancestress. Physiognomy, the art of judging character from its appearance. For we have then to impose a cosmic imagination or an illusion consciousness on the eternal reality. Brahman, the reality, must itself either be or have or support a constructing mind or some constructive consciousness greater than mind, but of an analogous nature, must be, by its activity or its sanction, the creator, and even perhaps in some sort by participation a victim, like mind, of its own illusion and error. Again, Sri Aurobindo has proposed and rejected that argument for good reason in earlier chapters. It would not be less perplexing if mind were simply a medium or mirror in which there falls the reflection of an original illusion or a false image or shadow of the reality. For the origin of this medium of reflection would be inexplicable, and the origin also of the false image cast upon it would be inexplicable. An indeterminable Brahman could only be reflected as something indeterminable, not as a manifold universe. Or if it be the inequality of the reflecting medium, its nature as of rippling and restless water that creates broken images of the reality, still it would be broken and distorted reflections of the truth that would appear there, not a pullulation, a sprouting of false names and images of things that had no source or basis of existence in the reality. And now we get to his point. There must be some manifold truth of the one reality which is reflected, however falsely or imperfectly, in the manifold images of the mind's universe. It could then very well be that the world might be a reality, and only the mind's construction of it or picture of it erroneous or imperfect. But this would imply that there is a knowledge other than our mental thought and perception, which is only an attempt at knowing, a true cognition which is aware of the reality and aware also in it of the truth of a real universe. Much more satisfying view of things. And I think that's a good place to pause. So we'll put our bookmarks there, and we propose to finish the chapter next week. And here in Pensacola, it will be the evening of the 14th. But at that hour when we meet, it'll be 5:30 in the morning in Pondicherry, and people will already have been winding their way through Sri Aurobindo's room, collecting the grace that descends that day. So at the end of our chapter, we'll say something about Sri Aurobindo and the meaning and impact of his birth upon this globe in 1872. So I look forward to that. But still tonight we have a touch from Savitri to share with everyone. We go back to the book of the Double Twilight. This is in Canto 3, the debate of love and death, where Savitri confronts death. I think you know who wins the struggle because the poem is named after her. We continue from where we left off. In this meeting of the Eternal's mingling masks, this tangled dance of passionate contraries, locking like lovers in a forbidden embrace the quarrel of their lost identity. Through this wrestle and wrangle of the extremes of power, Earth's million roads struggled towards deity. All stumbled on behind a stumbling guide, yet every stumble is a needed pace on unknown routes to an unknowable goal. All blundered and straggled towards the one divine. As if transmuted by a Titan spell, the eternal powers assumed a dubious face. Idols of an oblique divinity, they wore the heads of animal or troll, assumed ears of the fawn, the satyr's hoof, or harbored the demoniac in their gaze. A crooked maze they made of thinking mind, they suffered a metamorphosis of the heart, admitting bacchanal revelers from the night into its sanctuary of delights as in a Dionysian masquerade. On the highways, in the gardens of the world, they wallowed oblivious of their divine parts, as drunkards of a dire Circean wine, or a child who sprawls and sports in nature's mire. Even wisdom, hewer of the roads of God, is a partner in the deep, disastrous game. Lost is the pilgrim's wallet and the scrip. She fails to read the map and watch the star. A poor, self-righteous virtue is her stock, and reason's pragmatic grope or abstract sight. Or the technique of a brief hour's success she teaches, an usher in utility's school. On the ocean surface of vast consciousness, small thoughts and shoals are fished up into a net, but the great truths escape her narrow cast. Guarded from vision by creation's depths, obscure they swim in blind, enormous gulfs, safe from the little sounding leads of mind, too far for the puny diver's shallow plunge. Our mortal vision peers with ignorant eyes. It has no gaze on the deep heart of things. Our knowledge walks, leaning on error's staff, a worshipper of false dogmas and false gods, or fanatic of a fierce, intolerant creed, or a seeker doubting every truth he finds, a skeptic facing light with adamant no, or chilling the heart with dry, ironic smile, a cynic stamping out the God in man. A darkness wallows in the paths of time, or lifts its giant head to blot the stars. It makes a cloud of the interpreting mind and intercepts the oracles of the sun. Yet light is there. It stands at nature's doors. It holds a torch to lead the traveler in. It waits to be kindled in our secret cells. It is a star lighting an ignorant sea, a lamp upon our poop piercing the night. As knowledge grows, light flames up from within. It is a shining warrior in the mind, an eagle of dreams in the divining heart, an armor in the fight, a bow of God. Then larger dawns arrive, and wisdom's pomps cross through the being's dim, half-lighted fields. Philosophy climbs up thought's cloud-banked peaks, and science tears out nature's occult powers. Enormous jinns who serve a dwarf's small needs exposes the sealed minutiae of her art and conquers her by her own captive force. On heights unreached by minds most daring soar, upon a dangerous edge of failing time, the soul draws back into its deathless self. Man's knowledge becomes God's supernal ray. There is the mystic realm whence leaps the power, whose fire burns in the eyes of seer and sage. A lightning flash of visionary sight, it plays upon an inward verge of mind. Thought silenced gazes into a brilliant void. A voice comes down from mystic unseen peaks, a cry of splendor from a mouth of storm. It is the voice that speaks to nights profound. It is the thunder and the flaming call. Above the plains that climb from nescient earth, a hand is lifted towards the invisible's realm, beyond the superconscient's blinding line, and plucks away the screams of the unknown. A spirit within looks into the Eternal's eyes. It hears the word to which our hearts were deaf. It sees through the blaze in which our thoughts grew blind. It drinks from the naked breasts of glorious truth. It learns the secrets of eternity. Thus all was plunged into the riddling night. Thus all is raised to meet a dazzling sun. And I think we shall rest there. Namaste, Jai Ma.